Here is a number that requires a moment to fully absorb. 200 million people in 100 countries every week. That is the audience that Walker, Texas Ranger, was reaching at the peak of its run in the mid-1990s. Not the cumulative audience over 8 seasons, not the total viewership across the life of the show, but the weekly audience. The people who sat down every Saturday night on CBS and watched Cordell Walker dispense justice in the Texas Hill Country with his fists and his faith and his absolute refusal to accept that the bad guys were going to win. Hollywood had written Chuck Norris off. The box office numbers of the late 1980s were telling the story that Hollywood always tells about performers whose peak moment has passed. The moment is over. The audience has moved on. Time to recalibrate expectations about what kind of projects are appropriate going forward. Hollywood was wrong, not slightly wrong. Categorically, completely, historically wrong. Wrong in the specific way that the entertainment industry is wrong when it mistakes the end of a cultural moment for the end of a career, when it fails to understand that the audience it has stopped paying attention to is still there, still watching, still waiting for someone to give them exactly what Chuck Norris had always given them. 200 million people, 100 countries. Hollywood had no idea. This is episode 5. The reinvention that nobody predicted, the second act that outlasted the first. The years between the peak of the Cannon Films era and the premiere of Walker, Texas Ranger are the years that test what Chuck Norris is actually made of, not the test of success, which anyone can pass with sufficient talent, but the test of transition, which requires something that talent alone does not provide. The late 1980s offer him the specific challenge of a performer whose cultural moment has shifted without warning, and who must decide, without the guidance of obvious precedent, what comes next. The films slow down. The scripts that arrive are smaller, lower budgets, lesser ambitions, the kind of material that reflects a recalibration of expectations by an industry that operates on the merciless logic of the most recent result. He continues to train. This is not a strategy, it is simply who he is. The morning practice that began in a Korean dojang in 1958 has not been interrupted by championship or box office success or the specific difficulty of the current transition, and it is not interrupted now. The discipline that built everything is the discipline that sustains everything, including the capacity to face a difficult period without the panic that the entertainment industry reliably induces in people whose sense of self is too closely tied to their current commercial standing. Chuck's sense of self is not tied to his commercial standing. It never has been. It is tied to the values he has held since his mother taught them to him in Ryan, Oklahoma. The faith, the discipline, the commitment to the people depending on him. These do not fluctuate with box office numbers. They are not available for renegotiation when the external circumstances change. They are simply there, the foundation that the career was built on and that continues to support the man when the career requires rebuilding. He remarries in 1998, but the woman who will become his second wife, Gina O'Kelly, enters his life in the early 1990s before Walker has established itself, before the second act has revealed its full dimensions. She is a model and actress, 23 years younger than Chuck, and the relationship that develops between them is one of the genuine love stories of his later life, not the managed partnership of two people whose interests align conveniently, but the specific, surprised quality of a man in his 50s discovering that love, in its most complete form, was something he had not previously had access to. Gina sees Chuck with a clarity that the public image does not facilitate. She sees the shy Oklahoma boy underneath the action hero, the man whose faith and discipline are not performances, but the actual structure of his interior life. The person whose gentleness in private is as real as the toughness on screen. She responds to what she sees with a directness and a completeness that Chuck, who has spent his adult life being seen primarily as an image rather than a person, finds both surprising and deeply sustaining. The relationship becomes the personal foundation of the Walker years, the private center that the public success depends on without acknowledging. The same role that Diane Holchek filled in the early decades, Gina fills in the later ones. the person who makes the external discipline possible by providing the internal peace that discipline alone cannot manufacture. Walker, Texas Ranger premieres on CBS on April 21st, 1993, and the network's expectations are modest. CBS has commissioned the show as a Saturday night action series, the kind of programming that fills a time slot reliably without generating the kind of cultural conversation that the network's prestige programming produces. The audience for this slot is older, loyal, accustomed to a certain kind of television that the rest of the industry has largely stopped making. Straightforward stories about recognizable moral frameworks, told without irony, in which the right thing is identifiable, and the people who do it are rewarded, and the people who don't are held accountable. This is precisely what Walker, Texas Ranger, delivers. Cordell Walker, Texas Ranger, martial artist, man of faith, protector of the innocent, enforcer of the law in a state large enough to require his particular combination of skills, is the most complete expression in fictional form of what Chuck Norris actually believes. Not the values that a producer or a network executive assembled from market research and demographic analysis, but the values of a specific man from Oklahoma who grew up understanding that discipline and faith and loyalty are not abstractions but daily practices, and who has spent his entire adult life demonstrating what those practices produce when applied consistently. Walker is a loner who is also a team player, a man of action who is also a man of reflection, a fighter who fights reluctantly and only when the situation leaves no better option. A person whose physical capabilities are extraordinary and whose relationship to those capabilities is completely unaffected by ego. He uses what he has to protect people who need protecting. And when the situation is resolved, he goes back to the ranch and the ordinary life that the extraordinary abilities serve rather than replace. It is, in the most direct possible sense, a portrait of the man playing him. The faith dimension of the show is what distinguishes it most sharply from the action television of the same era. Walker prays. Walker attends church. Walker's moral framework is explicitly Christian in a way that network television in 1993 almost never permits, not as a plot device or a character quirk, but as the actual foundation of how the character understands justice, mercy, and the obligation to act when action is required. The network is initially uncertain about this dimension. The audience is not uncertain at all. The viewers, who have been waiting for a television hero whose faith is treated as strength rather than weakness, as something real rather than something to be embarrassed by, find Walker immediately and hold on to him with the loyalty of people who have been waiting a long time for exactly this. The show films entirely in Texas, in and around Dallas, with location work across the hill country and the plains and the cities and small towns that give the series its visual identity. Chuck insists on this. The authenticity of the location is not a production, convenience, or a budget calculation. It is the show's commitment to being what it claims to be. A story about Texas told in Texas, and that commitment communicates itself to the audience in ways that they may not consciously identify, but that they feel in the specific quality of the show's reality. The audience finds it immediately. The Saturday night ratings surprise everyone at the network, not the modest, acceptable performance of a show that fills a slot adequately. The genuine, sustained, growing ratings of a show that has found something its audience was waiting for. The viewers who come to Walker, Texas Ranger in the first season are not primarily the young men who made Missing in Action #1. They are older, the parents and grandparents of those young men, the generation that grew up on westerns and police procedurals and the specific television tradition of the moral hero who lives what he preaches and does not ask for credit for doing it. They bring their families. The show becomes, in a way that few television properties achieve in any era, genuinely multi-generational. Children watching with parents who are watching with grandparents, 3 generations finding different things to value in the same 60 minutes of television, and all of them finding something real. The children see the action and the martial arts. The parents see the values and the faith. The grandparents see the America they remember, or the America they always wanted, which is sometimes more powerful than the one they remember. The fan mail arrives in volumes that the network has not seen for a Saturday night drama in years. Not email, This is the early 1990s, before email has become the default medium of audience communication. Actual letters, handwritten and typed on typewriters and printed on home computers, from viewers who feel compelled to tell Chuck Norris something that cannot be expressed by simply watching the show. Veterans who find in Walker the respect for service that Missing in Action provided in the 1980s now applied to the quieter, more sustainable register of weekly television rather than the cathartic intensity of the cinematic fantasy. Elderly viewers who write to say that Walker, Texas Ranger, is the one show they watch with their grandchildren and the one show about which they feel no ambivalence. Parents who write to say that their children are asking questions after episodes about right and wrong, about faith, about what makes a person brave, that the parents had not known how to initiate. Chuck reads these letters. He reads them all as he has always read them, because the connection between his work and the people it serves is not a marketing relationship or a demographic consideration, but a genuine human exchange that he treats with the seriousness it deserves. The production of Walker, Texas Ranger, is a commitment of a specific and total kind, not the commitment of a film actor who arrives on set for a defined period and then returns to his private life, but the sustained, year-round commitment of a television lead whose name is above the title and whose presence is required in virtually every scene of virtually every episode of a show that produces 24 episodes per season. It is, by the standards of the entertainment industry, an enormous workload. 8 seasons, 196 episodes, 8 years of 6-day shooting weeks in Dallas, Texas, where the show is filmed to access the authentic Texas landscape that is as much a character in the series as any of the human performers. Chuck approaches the workload with the same discipline that has characterized every major undertaking of his life. He is prepared. He knows his lines. He arrives on time, which in television production terms means arriving significantly before the scheduled call time, because call time is the deadline, and preparation begins well before the deadline. He is the person on set whose reliability is absolute, and this reliability produces an efficiency in the production that has real and measurable consequences for the quality of what gets made. Scenes that might require multiple takes from a less prepared lead are completed in the time the schedule allocates, leaving room for the additional takes and the additional attention that the other elements of production need. The cast and crew of Walker, Texas Ranger described the set consistently and across 8 seasons in terms that echo what the casts and crews of his films always said. It is a professional environment, organized around the work rather than around personal drama or ego competition, in which the standard established by the lead is the standard that everyone rises to meet. This is not a given in television production. It is, in fact, comparatively rare. Sets organized around difficult leads are the norm rather than the exception, and the specific tone of a production is almost always set by the person whose name is above the title. Chuck's name is above the title. The tone is his. The KICKSTART Initiative launches during the Walker years and becomes one of the most significant things he does with the platform that the show provides. The program brings martial arts training, the specific transformative discipline that changed Chuck Norris's own life in a Korean dojang in 1958, into the lives of at-risk youth across Texas and eventually across the country, using the physical practice as the vehicle for the character development that Chuck has always understood martial arts to provide. The connection between the program and his own biography is direct and unambiguous. He was a boy without direction, without a father, without a clear path to anything, and he found in martial arts training the discipline that organized everything else. The KICKSTART children are that boy. Not every one of them will become a world champion or a television star or anything that the external world would measure as exceptional. But every one of them who learns the discipline of showing up, of accepting correction, of persisting through failure toward improvement, every one of them has received something that Chuck Norris received in Korea, and that he has spent his entire adult life understanding to be more valuable than any championship or any box office result. Over 100,000 children go through KICKSTART. The number is documented. The outcomes, reduced school dropout rates, reduced involvement with the juvenile justice system, improved academic performance, are measurable. This is not philanthropy as image management. It is the most direct possible expression of what Chuck Norris believes his life has been for. He visits the KICKSTART schools himself, not as a celebrity dropping in for a photo opportunity, but as a practitioner, a man who knows exactly what the training hall requires from a student and who wants to see with his own eyes whether the program is delivering what it promises. He watches the children train. He corrects technique when the correction is needed. He talks to the instructors about what is working and what needs adjustment. He treats the program with the same analytical seriousness that he brought to his own competitive development, because the stakes, the actual lives of actual children who have fewer second chances than most, are higher than any championship he ever competed for. The children who go through KICKSTART do not all know who Chuck Norris is. Many of them are too young to have seen the films or the television show that funded the program's existence. They know only that someone built a place where they are taken seriously, where their improvement is demanded rather than merely encouraged, where the discipline of showing up and doing the work produces results that they can measure in their own bodies and their own growing confidence. They know what the discipline does. Chuck knows why it does it. The connection between the shy Oklahoma boy who found himself in a Korean dojang in 1958 and the children finding themselves in KICKSTART schools in Dallas and Houston and San Antonio in the 1990s is not symbolic. It is direct. It is the same thing given forward. Walker, Texas Ranger, runs for 8 seasons and from 1993 to 2001 and ends not because the audience has abandoned it or the network has lost faith in it, but because Chuck Norris has decided that 8 years is the right length for a story that has told what it needed to tell. The decision to end the show on his own terms is characteristic. He does not wait for the ratings to decline to the point where cancellation is the industry's choice rather than his own. He assesses the situation with the analytical clarity that has served him in every context. The show is still performing, the audience is still loyal, the product is still delivering what it promised, and he decides that 8 years is enough, that the story of Cordell Walker has reached the natural completion that well-told stories reach, and that ending it at that point rather than extending it past its natural life is the right thing to do. Hollywood does not always understand this kind of decision. The industry's logic runs in the direction of extension rather than completion. If something is working, keep doing it until it stops working, and then try to revive it after it has stopped. The Chuck Norris logic runs differently. Do the thing fully, do it well, and end it when it is done rather than when you are forced to stop. The finale of Walker, Texas Ranger airs on May 19, 2001. It is watched by the largest audience the show has ever drawn. The specific phenomenon of series finales, in which audiences who have watched a show for years return in numbers that the regular season never produces to witness the ending. The audience for the Walker finale is enormous. They are saying goodbye to a character who has been a genuine presence in their Saturday evenings for 8 years, and to the man who played him with the specific authenticity that made the character feel real rather than performed. The finale is written to give Cordell Walker the ending his values always pointed toward: justice served, family secured, the Texas landscape bearing witness to the completion of a story that was always about more than law enforcement. Chuck approaches the filming of it with the same professionalism he brought to the first episode 8 years earlier, but with an additional layer of awareness that the last day of a long production always produces: the knowledge that this specific combination of people in this specific place doing this specific work will not assemble again. The crew that has worked with him for 8 years. The cast who have become the kind of colleagues that long productions produce when the leader sets the right tone from the beginning. The Texas landscape that became as familiar as any place he has lived. He thanks them all, individually, without ceremony or speech, in the specific way of a man who expresses gratitude through direct, personal acknowledgement rather than performance. The crew members who have been with the show since the beginning will later describe this as the detail they remember most clearly about the last day. Not the filming of the final scene, not the wrap party, but Chuck Norris going person to person and saying thank you to each of them as if each of them were the most important person on the set, which, in his understanding of how a production works and what it requires, they were. Chuck Norris and Cordell Walker are in the ways that matter, the same person. The faith is the same. The discipline is the same. The commitment to justice and family and the protection of people who cannot protect themselves is the same. The gap between the actor and the role, which in most acting is the fundamental creative space, the distance between who the performer is and who the character requires, is, in Chuck Norris's case, almost non-existent. He played a version of himself for 8 years in front of 200 million people in 100 countries, and the version was accurate. The viewers who wrote him letters knew this. The veterans who found in Walker the same thing they found in Missing in Action. A man whose values are genuine and whose capabilities are real and whose commitment to doing the right thing does not require external validation or institutional permission knew this. The show ends. The man continues. He is 60 years old. He has built a martial arts empire, made 40 films, run 8 seasons of one of the most widely watched television dramas in the world, and spent the Walker years establishing a charitable program that has put the thing that saved his own life, discipline, martial arts, the daily practice of showing up, into the hands of 100,000 at-risk children. He trains every morning. He always has. He always will. Episode 6, The Meme, the Myth, and the Man. How a 20-year-old college student's internet jokes made Chuck Norris famous to a generation that had never seen a single frame of his films. And the hardest fight of his life, the one that had nothing to do with martial arts. This is Legends of America.